Hello, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Eco-Socialist Network webinar titled Beyond Capitalism Toward Liberation, a Faithful Case for Eco-Socialism. My name is Reverend Gregory Stevens. I use they and he pronouns. I'm recording this on the unceded Ramaytush Ohlone lands here in San Francisco. I am a white person, I have a short beard, and my blonde hair is also short and combed over to the side. I'm wearing a blue blazer, a white button down, and I have a beautiful background image of the Golden Gate Bridge as the sun sets over the ocean in the back. Now, let's get started. I want to begin by saying that this talk and workshop is not meant to sound radical. The ideas I'm going to share are not fringe or extreme. They're in fact what we working people want. And working people are the vast majority of humanity. And it's what our planet requires for our species' actual survival. These ideas truly only appeal radical to the billionaire Epstein ruling class and to their systems, the systems that profit from worker exploitation and planetary destruction. Every single one of us on this call, yes, even you six-figure types, is closer to homelessness than to amassing billions of dollars through worker exploitation or even becoming a capitalist. None of us benefit from a system that poisons our air, burns our forests, raises our rent, and leaves our elders choosing between food and medicine. Our hope does not lie in individual escape or moral purity. Our hope is in collective organizing as a class, in building power together so that life can flourish. I also want to be clear that this talk is not simply meant to inform you about interesting ideas or offer a new framework to admire from a distance. This is an organizing talk. It's meant to move us into action. This is meant to invite you into the work of building a better world by confronting and replacing the systems that are destroying our current one. Information without organization does nothing. Faith without works is dead. The goal here is to build working class power and socialist consciousness so that we can work towards building socialist revolution together. As I like to say, theologians have interpreted the world. The purpose of Unitarian Universalism, however, is to change it. Now, as you know, our religion has emerged from the liberal Christian tradition, and theologically speaking, the Unitarians brought the God figure of Christianity back down to earth. They emphasized Jesus' humanity and the possibility of our ability as humans to follow his great example, the possibility of abundant life through the way that Jesus taught, the way of life that Jesus taught. Jesus was a working class queer Palestinian migrant who lived under Roman occupation, who defied the Roman Empire, who proclaimed equality among the masses, who fed the hungry, clothed the naked, healed the sick, and welcomed the stranger. His ministry was not about private belief or private profit. It was about social transformation and drawing the circle of compassion ever wider. Then there were the Universalists, those working class folk who proclaimed a love so vast that even the fires of hell could not survive it. They declared that no one was disposable. No one was beyond redemption. No one was outside the circle of God's loving care. Love in this tradition was not conditional or punitive, it was liberating. When these two merge, Unitarian and Universalism, we arrive at something closer to where we are today. A rich mix of ancestral teachings, ancient wisdom traditions, reason, science, poetry, lived experience, all grounded in an ethical commitment to love our neighbors as ourselves. Not abstractly, but very materially, in a real concrete way. Our tradition has done amazing work in this way, though this talk is meant to push us even further. We have asked the question, what does it mean to love our neighbor? But the deeper question is this: what does it look like to build a society where that love is actually embodied? What does love look like when it shapes housing, healthcare, transportation, energy, labor, and land policy? Another way our faith names this is through covenant. Quote, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our wider association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and stands at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for living those values through spiritual discipline of love. Those values are justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. End quote. It's worth naming what's not on this list. Our values are not competition, greed, consumption, exploitation, hoarding, planetary plunder. Those are the operating values of capitalism. They are the values of an economic and social system that is fundamentally incompatible with our faith, let alone the planet. Our covenant is not decorative but demanding. It is the core religious claim of Unitarian Universalism. It insists that we do not simply affirm those values in words, but that we take responsibility for building a society where those values can take structural shape so that the well-being of all can be brought into the game, into the discussion. A society organized around love cannot be built on vast inequality, like our current society. A society committed to interdependence cannot tolerate a fossil fuel-driven interconnected economy. A faith that proclaims dignity for all cannot coexist peacefully with systems that treat people and the earth as disposable. This is not radical theology. This is barely revolutionary. This is just faithful theology. This is our Unitarian Universalism at its best. And it calls us to way more than charity. It calls us to socialist revolution. You see, day by day, the ecological and social crises, the poly crises we face, they deepen. We're already living through the hottest years I ever recorded. Millions of species face extinction, and more than 3 billion people living in regions scientists say are highly vulnerable to climate collapse. Climate change is not a side effect or an accident. It's the most dangerous expression of the heartbeat of capitalism. Endless growth on a finite planet. Where does endless growth on a finite planet get you? Extinct. To combat the demoralization and the inaction that this crisis produces, it's crucial that we understand the true root causes and not fall prey to scapegoating or blaming individual lifestyle choices for the problem. The crisis we face goes far beyond our personal choices about what we consume or how we get around on transit. The mainstream narrative conveyed through academia, through media, through UU circles, and Hollywood also tends to just spread disinformation, deflect blame away from the profit-driven system of capitalism, and put it on to you. One of the most persistent myths I hear in UU circles is the myth of overpopulation. The concept has its roots in Reverend Thomas Malthus, who theorized that overpopulation was the cause of all society's ills. Thankfully, Marx and Engels criticized the Malthusian view as unscientific and lacking in historical context. They stressed that one cannot separate the issues of population from societal structures, and that the inequalities under capitalism could be overcome through the reorganization of the economy on a socialist basis. Since then, this bourgeois ideology has been used to scapegoat poor and marginalized communities and to justify forced sterilization, eugenics, and population control measures imposed on the global south and communities of color here in the north. In reality, global birth rates have been declining dramatically for 50 years. Humanity's total fertility rate is around 2.5 births, replacement level. Overpopulation is not the problem. Capitalism is the problem. If this system continues to go unchecked, it will render mass parts of the entire earth uninhabitable. turning living ecosystems into biological deserts. As always, the most impoverished people will be hit first and the hardest, even though they've contributed literally the least to all the damage. At the same time, as a tiny fraction of the population grows, unimaginably wealthy, tens of millions of workers here in the United States and billions of workers around the world are pushed deeper into dire conditions. Wages stagnate, rents soar. Healthcare becomes a luxury. Food, energy, transportation, they all become sources of anxiety instead of basic human rights. This is not a mere policy failure. This is a predictable outcome of an economic system built to concentrate wealth upward and ignore human and planetary needs in the name of profit. Oddly enough, all the wealth in society, though, is created by the labor of us working people. This is what defines the working class. It's our relationship to the means of production, the ways in which we choose to produce society. Nothing exists without our labor. Not the food on our tables, not the homes we live in, not the churches we worship in, not the technologies we use, not the care that sustains us. And yet, the wealth we collectively create is increasingly captured as the private property of a tiny class of owners who produce nothing of real value. This contradiction is not incidental. It's the defining feature of capitalism. While the working class is not a monolithic entity, and this is something that I think will speak to more UUs because I think instead of organizing ourselves around class, we've organized ourselves around identity. And the working class, though, is not a monolithic entity. It's black, it's brown, Latine, queer, disabled. It's got every identity in it. It's united by its defining feature, though, the lack of ownership of private property used to produce society, and the requirement to work for those who own that private property, the capitalists, or for the capitalist government. The capitalists own the banks, corporations, factories, warehouses, retail outlets, and major media. In a very real way, they control the lives of workers and the unemployed. The capitalists decide who lives and who dies. But in the same way, the working class sets into motion the means of production. That means we too have the power to shut shit down. The working class can shut down the production of all of society. We can shut the capitalist economy down as a whole. Now, note, this is different than where most liberals place the solution, and that's at the site of consumption, as if you could buy your way out of the climate crisis or shop your way better, you know? No, we are attacking the site of production, the place in which the things are produced themselves, not the site of consumption. We cannot shop differently to save the world. This is a great and mighty power the vast majority of humanity has over the capitalist class. This is our superpower. It must be harnessed, sharpened into a spear. Our working class is the only class that holds the ability and the vision to create a society where all of life can flourish. We have a decision to make. Do we unite as a class and take power from the capitalists, destroying the world? Or do we let everything burn and billions of people suffer? As the great Rosa Luxemburg once asked many decades ago, socialism or barbarism? The climate catastrophe demonstrates the disastrous self-interest of the capitalist class perfectly. To avoid excessive warming, as well as the many severe environmental threats produced by capitalism, it is necessary for our species' survival to shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. But the capitalist class is driven to protect its investments in coal, oil, and gas. Hell, a majority of lobbyists at the international COP conferences come from the fossil fuel industry. Now, those of us from the activist side have long known that the COP conferences are pretty absurd and they're just a parade of greenwash capitalism. These greedy and violent billionaires and their lackeys will do whatever it takes to hold on to power, even if that means destroying the world. The struggle to adapt and to mitigate the impacts of global warming is therefore a class struggle. And now this is key. This is a class struggle, so we are in a struggle for power. This is not a mere struggle of morality or individual consumer choices. All people are not equally responsible for the climate crisis either, much like British Petroleum or BP wanted you to think when they rebranded with a green logo and invented the carbon footprint calculator in the early 2000s. The damage has not been caused by humanity in general, but by specific systems and specific billionaires. So, think about who makes the majority of decisions about what methods are used in the production of energy in industry, agriculture, transportation, construction, and mining. It's the billionaire Epstein class who determine whether or not to continue producing energy and fueling transportation with fossil fuels. It's the investor class who decides how many acres of forests to pillage. It's multinational agribusiness owners who created the chemical dependent industrial system that enables the commodification of a for profit food system in the first place. Just 13 companies are responsible for the majority of deforestation globally. A 2022 Oxfam report found that the average billionaire is responsible for carbon emissions over 1 million times higher than the average person in the bottom 90% of humanity. We, the working class majority, have no control over the mechanisms of the economy that drive the vast majority of the greenhouse gas emissions unless we organize as a class and seize the means of production. Humans as a species are not the cause of the crisis that we face. It's a handful of ruling class billionaire Epstein elites and the capitalist system itself that they prop up. Imperialist countries built their wealth by burning fossil fuels while extracting resources, labor, and land from the countries they colonized. The benefits were concentrated in the hands of a few, while the costs were exported to outward and downward to us. Within industrialized countries, the same pattern holds. The wealth created by us workers was funneled upward into the pockets of capitalists, while we working class, poor, and oppressed communities are treated as expendable. Our neighborhoods become sacrifice zones, sites for refineries, highways, landfills, toxic waste dumps. The carbon economy delivered profit for some and pollution for the entire world. And then there's the US military industrial complex, the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases globally. Immense amounts of fossil fuels go into logistical support for the over 800 US bases spanning the globe, in addition to fueling training exercises and the transport of military personnel, of weapons and equipment. The exact emissions from weapons testings and their use against the targets of US imperialism are incalculable. Despite being exempt from UN emissions reporting, it's estimated that emissions from the US military sector equal the emissions of over 140 countries combined. Once again, the majority of humanity does not make decisions regarding whether or not to scale back US military operations. It's the ruling Epstein elite who call the shots within the Pentagon. Addressing the climate crisis and environmental racism requires deliberate planning, though, at every level: international, national, regional, and local. Agricultural, transportation, shipping, construction, mining, and heavy industry must be transformed from industries of profit to those that benefit all of humanity. That is why we demand democracy in the workplace, especially in these large industries. Capitalists claim that moving from the carbon economy threatens working people. In reality, their interests are opposed to ours. A just transition to sustainable socialist production is not a threat to workers. It's the only way to guarantee economic stability, dignified work, and a livable future, because the workers who created the wealth would finally be the ones managing it. The current way our society is structured stands in direct confrontation with Unitarian Universalist values of justice, equity, interdependence, transformation, and the like. It's definitely not a government of, by, and for the people. The existing government and state, the military, police, intelligence agencies, courts, prisons, bureaucracy, and so on, defend the interests of the capitalist class. That's their point. Racist, anti-working class police brutality is rampant. ICE agents are murdering people in broad daylight, and now the made-up war on drugs is back bigger than ever as they go to steal more oil from Venezuela and try to destroy more socialist projects across the global south, especially Cuba, with this tiny little island just miles off the coast of Florida under a 50-year blockade and sanctions from the largest empire to ever exist. Our existing state apparatus and government institutions, represented by the two ruling capitalist parties, were established to protect and defend the interests of the capitalist ruling class. The much heralded system of checks and balances is really an undemocratic means of protecting the rich against the majority of the poor. At every level of government, from the presidency to city councils, elections have become exercises in dollar-driven profit politics. Corporate lobbyists openly purchase influence, shaping laws, long before any public debate even takes place. What passes for democracy is largely theater, while the real decisions are made behind closed door by the capitalist class. The capitalist system has proven to be incapable of meeting the needs of every person, even in the richest country in history. Every year, millions more people are forced into abject poverty, many while working full time, and many are denied the right to a job. As China just lifted 850 million people out of poverty. You see, simply reforming the capitalist system is not enough, and that is the vision of way too many Unitarian Universalists. We must transform the profit motive at its core. For the capitalists, reforms are a threat to the status quo. Reforms for the working class ease the burdens of living under capitalism through the extension of civil rights or other beneficial social and economic programs. So it makes sense that we UUs often stay in this place working on reforms. While reforms must be fought for and they can be won, they're always under attack by the ruling class. And Trump is a perfect example of how all those wonderful reforms won in even the civil rights era can be peeled back within seconds. Reforms will never put workers in control of the means of producing society. They will always be subject to the capitalist rulers unless they are seized through the working class gaining its power through collective organization. Capitalism itself cannot be reformed. Its supreme goal is the maximization of profit. The only force capable. Oh, I lost my spot. The only force capable of putting an end to this criminal system is the organized working class. Capitalism cannot be voted out of power. It will take a working class revolution. The capitalist class will stop at nothing to prevent or overturn reforms by violently repressing, misdirecting, or quelling any form of popular rebellion. The capitalists, though, they're the violent ones, not the workers fighting for health care. Without a complete uprooting of the system that causes all of this violence, that causes all the problems workers and oppressed people face, exploitation and oppression will just continue marching on. The capitalist class will continue to rule. Capitalism is a failed system that, in its insatiable appetite for ever greater profits, threatens global ecological destruction on an unprecedented scale, with workers and oppressed people bearing the disproportionate burden of the environmental disaster. Our aim is to abolish the corrupt, rotten, and anti-people capitalist economy, the state and its governmental system. We want to replace it with one dedicating to meeting the needs of people and the planet, a socialist system. And now, this isn't even abstract. Just 3 months ago, right here in San Francisco, we saw exactly what the working class power looks like when organized through a faith community. In February of 2026, United Educators of San Francisco, UESF, went on strike for the first time in 47 years. This was not just a teacher strike, it was certificated and classified workers going out together, meaning it was teachers from all across the sector, or not just teachers, excuse me, employers from all across the educating sector. For 4 days, they shut it down. Rallies at Dolores Park at City Hall drew over 20,000 people. The whole city was alive with different corners at different schools and workers and teachers coming together chanting that they deserve dignity and respect in their contract fight. They won fully funded family health care, wage increases, special education workload protections, sanctuary protections for immigrant families, and housing protections for unhoused students. As they won every demand that they put forward. As UESF Vice President Natalie Hersey, a friend of mine, put it, this victory was years in the making, built through site structures, a 100-person bargaining team drawn directly from the schools, and the patient, disciplined working of building the capacity to do a hard thing. Withhold your labor, not go into the classroom, not be with your students. That takes time, and it takes organized power. What the strike did was rip the cover off the contradictions of San Francisco, a city known for its liberal history, but built on the conditions that are profoundly exploitative. Educators can't afford to live in the city where they teach. Salesforce and tech billionaires profit off the direction of a city that is increasingly unwelcome to us working class people. The strikers scared the people in power, and they won. And it was my church, the First Unitarian Universalist Society of San Francisco, that was right in the middle of it all. We opened our doors as a base camp during the strike. It was a place for community support, for childcare, for office supplies, for organizing meetings, for public forums. We even printed a newspaper that we would deliver to the strike lines that summarized all the actions of the day in the bargaining meeting with a new political analysis. We did this in partnership with our friends at the Party for Socialism and Liberation. This is what it looks like when faith and socialism show up together for the working class, not in acts of charity, but in solidarity. Not with thoughts and prayers, but with real material support for revolutionary politics. This is our Unitarian Universalism made real in the world. As Unitarian Universalists, it is our duty to fight for a system that meets the needs of people and the planet. Only socialism can bring about such world. This means we must begin to commit ourselves to the study of working class history, movements, and strategies. This does not mean that we have it all perfectly figured out or some beautiful, perfect blueprint for what's next. Instead, we utilize what our theological tradition calls transformation, what our Marxist tradition calls historical materialism. It's a commitment to recognizing the material conditions of reality are always changing, moving through contradictions and progressing through struggle. As we seek to build a socialist society, it will look very different from other socialist projects. And as organized working class, empowered with revolutionary socialist theory, we will address these conditions as they arise. But here are some of the basics that we hope to build under socialism. The socialist government will be directed to address the interests of and by working and poor people. No laws, regulations, or measures will negatively impact the rights of working and poor people in society. The exploitation of working class labor for private profit will be prohibited. It will be the right of every person to have guaranteed union representation at their job, to have full social benefits, including a pension, health care, workers' comp, paid parental and family leave for up to 2 years, paid sick and disability leave, a minimum of 1 month's paid vacation, at least 12 paid holidays. Poverty will be eradicated by providing a guaranteed living income for any worker who is not able to find or hold a job. The work week could be 30 hours. Free, high quality healthcare could be provided to every person regardless of their citizenship. Decent housing for every person because housing would be a human right. No one paying more than 10% of their income on housing would be key. Free, high quality education from preschool to college, as well as post-college opportunities for lifelong learners. Under a socialist system, where what is produced, how much is produced, and what materials are used, and how much waste is created is a decision made by the majority, by the workers who create all the wealth of society. We can collectively find the best solutions together. Humanity has the tools and the knowledge to immediately shift to wind and solar energy production, to build a zero emissions nationwide mass transit system, to shift to regenerative agriculture and agroforestry practices that work with nature instead of degrading it, to base production on what is suitable or sustainable instead of what's profitable, and to create eco-cities that support biodiversity and cool air temperatures. The economic system we live under is the barrier to implementing all of these ecological transformations. Under socialism, the barrier is removed because people and planet are key. Now, if you ask me, all of this sounds like a bunch of Unitarian Universalists got together and drafted a plan to build a better world. We are living at the crossroads where humanity is offered only two real paths forward: an increasingly violent and ecologically suicidal capitalism, or ecosocialism, the democratic organization of society around human and planetary need instead of private profit. In moments like this, if we're going to meet the moment, neutrality is not an option. Our faith in the inherent worth and dignity of every person demands material conditions that make dignity possible. Interdependence is not a metaphor when supply chains choke, fires burn, and the poor are sacrificed for shareholder returns. To choose universal love, to choose universalism in this moment is to choose socialism. It's to build working class power capable of transforming our economy, of transforming our energy systems, and of transforming our daily political life. It is to abolish the profit motive that turns the earth into a resource pit and people into expendable inputs, and to replace it with collective care, democratic planning, and shared abundance. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called not just to imagine this world, but to organize for it, to struggle for it, and to help bring it into being. This is what it means to put our values to work and make our faith real in the world. We cannot do this without love being made structural into a socialist system where everyone's needs and the planet's needs are met, not for profit, but because it is our basic, inherent worth and dignity that demands it. Thank you for joining me. Amen and blessed be.